Everyone. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, great. And I apologize, some technical issues there. So thank you everyone for joining us. It's good to be here. We've got an interesting session planned for everyone. We would start because we do have a very tight timeline to achieve so much. So I was hoping I would have Ini here to Abimbola to do the introductions, but I might just be able to just take that immediately. We will share also the agenda so that everyone is guided accordingly. So perhaps I should just start with that. I'll try and share the agenda. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So the Sustainable Conversation, this is the second edition in the series, the webinar series. Today we're looking at evaluating the impact of COVID-19 on corporate social responsibility and marketing. This is just scheduled to be a 1.5 hour long program. So at this moment, it's my pleasure to recognize our panelists who have been very gracious to accept to serve as panelists on this particular webinar. So we have with us Lampe Omoyele, is the Managing Director of Nitro 121. We have Bridget, the Head Marketing and Communications, Stanbic IBTC Holdings. We have Noni Patricia Goma. She's the Executive Secretary, NTN Foundation. Then, of course, we have Oyetola Oduyemi of the End Fund, as well as Yomi Fawemi, a sustainability professional with us today. And thank you, everyone, for joining. So quickly, I'll just go through what it is I would cover today. We'll have the panelists will have an opportunity to share with us their opening remarks. Then, of course, I will engage then, of course, then open the session up to our participants so that they can also ask their question. And hopefully, we would, at the end of it, would have concluded a well-spent engagement, and then we can call it a day. Okay, so I have everyone still on board.
Yes, thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Elizabeth. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I want to still formally introduce our speakers, and that's just to give you a bit of the agenda. So I think it's only right to be able to share a bit about their brief. So it gives a bit of a context of why we asked them to do this for us. So very quickly, let me talk about Lampe Omoyele. Lampe Omoyele is a widely respected business leader and mentor in the marketing and advertising space. He's currently the Managing Director of Nitro 121, one of Africa's leading marketing, communication, and brand management companies. Lampe holds a BSc and MSc degrees in biochemistry. He's an alumnus of Lagos Business School, a fellow of the National Institute of Marketing in Nigeria, trustee of the Advertisers Association of Nigeria. He's a recent awardee, several awards in his portfolio. But I'm looking at one here, honored by Marketing Society of Kenya's Warriors Award, and in 2008. In 2018, he was listed amongst the 50 most influential marketing communication practitioners in Nigeria. It's good to have you here, Lampe Omoyele.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Bridget is currently the head marketing and communication for Stanbic IBTC Holdings. She's a multifaceted marketing professional with more than 23 years of global experience in brand strategy, sponsorship, digital marketing, data analytics, and all elements of communications. She has a proven track record in running internal and external corporate communications, as well as product integrated marketing campaigns across various countries and sectors, including aviation, financial services, and non-governmental organizations. Bridget, it's really great to have you here. And then we come to Noni. Noni is joining us from the UK. Noni Uboma is an enthusiastic and experienced director, awarded one of the top 50 most inspiring women in Nigeria by Business Day newspaper in 2019. She has vast experience in corporate social responsibility, public policy, stakeholder and relationship management, project management included. She has led interventions where she had to collaborate with government, executive committees, board members, communities, and other stakeholders. And it's really great to have Noni here because we would be tapping into that vast experience that she's got as well.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, it's a pleasure.
Great. We're also very pleased to have Oyitola Oduyemi. Oyitola's passion lies in innovatively driving business transformation. She's managed a lot of stakeholders and group interventions as well. She enjoys inspiring ideation of construct that eliminates barriers between entities and possibilities, so the bridge maker. She's got broad experience across different sectors, including banking, energy, FMCG, telecommunications. Her specialty is building sustainable brands. For working corporate social responsibility, she has this recognition as the most outstanding CSR practitioner at the Sustainability, Enterprise, and Responsibility Award Series for Africa in 2016. Oyitola, it's good to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. Good afternoon.
A nice one too. This panel will not be complete without introducing this gentleman, Yomi Fawaimi. He is a human resources management professional. Yomi holds a first-class degree in estate management and has postgraduate degrees in estate management, sustainable development, and education. He has decades of experience in teaching and research in several Nigerian universities. Yomi also practices and consults in human resources management, corporate governance, leadership, and corporate responsibility. He's a published author. He's a regular guest that appears on several media houses and is active he does a lot of speaking engagements. So Yomi, this isn't exactly new to you. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all the other panelists for joining.
Okay, great. I want to provide some level of context to guide our conversation. Basically, just to share, I'm sure our participants know this, a few things that we know and then things that we do not know. And then we'll request that you give us your opening remarks. So what do we know? Globally, I can give you the figures. As of yesterday evening, over 11 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. We've recorded thus far over 500,000 deaths. In Africa, confirmed cases over 300,000. In Nigeria, confirmed cases over 29,000. Recovered about 11,000. Deaths 654. In Lagos, being a very important center for the country, we have over 11,244 confirmed cases. Recovered about just over 1,500 over that. And then deaths, we've recorded 132. These are alarming figures, considering that for anybody who is just a little bit of being human, one death is just too much. And then when we talk about these numbers, these are really alarming. What's still when you do not know who is next, actually. This has had also very important implications in the market space as governments are fighting between finding the balance between the economics, livelihoods, and safety. And sometimes you're asking what is the right path to take. But let's look at some of the impacts as well. We've noticed also a spike in ethical consumption. People are a little more concerned about how their spending affects other people and this society and the environment. This is a fact. People are a bit more conscious. Gradually, we've moved beyond just very much, survival thinking and trying to stock up basic necessity. But you still find people really now a little more conscious about thinking it's not just about me. Again, we've seen marketing budgets dive, and where they haven't, they've shifted, to where the stakeholders think are more interesting areas, to consider for survival reasons as well. And then in the world of sustainability, we've seen a lot, because again, there had to be first level response, a lot of philanthropic giving, and trying to immediately get out of the situation. And maybe a lot of confusion about whether that is really sustainability actually. If that's all of it. So this is what we know. But a lot of things that we also do not know, because this system has also put us on a stop, pause, reset. But what are we resetting actually? What are we actually resetting? So we do need to have some ideas about those functionalities that we need to reset. A bit of a guide. I was speaking with one of the panelists, Nani precisely, and she was saying, we don't know many things. There are many unknowns, in that regard. But we still, humans find a way where there seems to be no way. So we do need to have a sense of what should we be resetting. So that gives us a big question about clarity. What are the next steps? What is very important also, you will agree with me, there have been a lot of talks about the nexus between sustainability and marketing, So are we seeing a stronger marriage, if there's anything like that now, and all of that? So we really would want to know how to proceed. So I will, without wasting much time, I want to get a feel of what you see. And I'll start with Nani. Please, how do you see evaluating the impact of COVID-19 on corporate social responsibility and marketing? What do you see from your end?
So thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be part of this event. For me, I'm going to talk from a corporate social responsibility angle, because it's an area that's very close to my heart. And I would say that if anyone ever doubted the importance of CSR prior to COVID, I think they should be having a rethink by now. Especially if you're of the belief that one responsibility of business is really about profit maximization, your thoughts should be changing by now. And I mean, the trend has already started changing. Last quarter of last year, a group of businessmen, the top CEOs in American companies, had a rethink, and they issued a U-turn statement on the purpose of business, where they committed to leading their companies for the benefit of all stakeholders, customers, communities, and shareholders. So essentially, they are more or less debunking shareholder priority and advocating corporate social responsibility, because in essence, it's really about business considering wider effect of the stakeholders. And why does CSR matter? For me, doing stakeholder-centric business, especially at this sort of time, is about adding value to the society. It's not about just making money, because there is a concept of interdependency. Business is dependent on society. Society is dependent on business. So there's that symbiotic relationship. So business, you can't do business in a community or in a country without thinking about the well-being of that country. Even those who can afford to go abroad, for instance, for treatment at this particular time, don't have access to those treatments. So they have to rely on that local system, which is essentially weakened. So it's in everyone's interest, really, to think about the best way to build our society using corporate social responsibility. So CSR is something that appeals to everyone, stakeholders, customers, investors are more interested in impact of businesses, so it's not just about the bottom line. And COVID has seen a lot of companies step up. Obviously, you talked about the philanthropy side of things, but is that enough? You find that some companies in the UK, for instance, have had to switch productions. You have a company that manufactures beer. In the crisis period, they started manufacturing hand sanitizer. You have companies that you have the Royal Mint, for instance. They manufacture money for a lot of countries. So what do they start doing during this period? They started making visors. So it's a situation where it's all hands on deck. The telecoms companies, the platform companies, working round the clock to make sure that everyone is connected, making sure that tariffs are affordable, etc. So it really is helping us rethink how we do business, how essentially how capitalism should actually be run going forward. So sustainable businesses and sustainable concepts of doing business is beyond just the bottom line now, because there's that interdependency between different systems. So now we have to look at a more societal way of doing things going forward. So that would be my opening remark.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Oyintola, I would like to get your thoughts on the impact of COVID-19 from your own perspective. What do you see?
Okay, so thank you very much again. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to be here to speak as well as learn. I have my pen and I'm taking notes. But my first thought is the pandemic is a public health crisis that has morphed into an economic and a financial crisis. So this, speaks to the power of the health sector. Literally, the world as we know it will never be the same on account of this pandemic. And however this pans out, it's definitely on course to have enduring social, environmental, economic, and cultural impact on people and society. Before I go further, I think it's important to highlight that while most CSR practitioners know the difference between, or see the parallels between CSR and sustainability, there are those that still see it from the narrow confines of social issues. Others see CSR as an adjunct of marketing, which it is not. So for clarity, I will approach this discourse from the perspective of CSR as business sustainability or corporate responsibility. And what's business sustainability? It's, refers to the beliefs and actions that drive businesses to contribute to holistic, sustainable development while avoiding and tackling negative externalities. The nexus that I see between business sustainability and COVID-19 is that achieving business sustainability requires adeptness at managing and balancing the needs and expectations of different key stakeholders, internal as well as external. Optimal handling of the COVID pandemic by businesses will require the realization that long-term survival and development is hinged on achieving a balance between business subsistence and growth on the one hand, and harmony with its various stakeholders on the other. So the question is not if, but how to advance corporate responsibility to realize interdependent social, economic, and environmental goals. It's very important at this time to take a sustainable approach to tackling the pandemic by businesses. Why? It gives a broad range of viable opportunities for corporates that are driven by sustainable and purposeful approach to sustainability. Companies that also have authentic corporate responsibility agendas will build stronger brand affinity and social license with key stakeholders, including customers and the general public. Also, bonds that are forged by corporate organizations at this time with brands and consumers typically are more meaningful and they last longer than those that are forged in normal times, as you see. There's also the issue of addressing the me now versus us later conundrum. Companies that show their focus on us, on the whole ecosystem and not just themselves, and also have the frame of mind to look beyond the present into the future will differentiate positively. You know, it's clear, it's becoming more and more clear as time passes that companies that will thrive post the COVID pandemic are those that have resilient CSR commitments, strategies, and effective implementation. So I think, you know, in wrapping up my initial thoughts on this, I think that government support is very important in helping corporates handle this crisis. I also acknowledge the fact that survival is key for corporates. And so before we talk about sustainability, you have to survive in the here and now. And that we are definitely identified. I also, one thing I like to say is innovation is king, but integrity is its throne. So what do I mean by that? It's very important to be innovative in tackling, you know, and Noni has given some fantastic examples of corporates that, you know, have pivoted in fantastic ways to handle this pandemic. However, integrity is its throne. And so it's not just what you're doing, but what you're not doing, what you're doing in other sectors. I mean, we've all heard or read of organizations that are leaders in corporate responsibility, even here in Nigeria, that have been slammed on social media for things that they're doing outside of the generous grants and philanthropy to tackling COVID-19, but they're doing to other stakeholders, and they've been slammed for that. So you have to be consistent and act with integrity. Post-COVID, greenwashing and lip service will not survive keener consumer and public scrutiny. I think it's also very important that there's synergetic relationships that are built with key stakeholders at this time. So partnerships, power partnerships. It's also very important to keep one's finger on the pulse of stakeholders, as Facebook, you know, has found out in recent times. It's one thing to think you're doing the right thing, to plan to do the right thing, but also what do your stakeholders think about what you're doing? It's important to keep your pulse on that. And finally, I think corporates need to build more inclusive and sustainable post-COVID economies, you know, that are more resilient in facing future global challenges. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Oyetola, for sharing with us. You've itemized a number of interesting points: ecosystem outlook, innovation, but of course, matching that with integrity. But I would like to ask Bridget, do you see differently, or what do you see exactly as regards the impact of COVID-19 on CSR, but more importantly, marketing, which I know is your forte?
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, and apologies. I was struggling with a bit of the connection earlier on. Thanks, Ini, for jumping in on that. So for me, I don't see it any differently. I think Noni and Oyetola have said it all. But from a marketing perspective, we have had to look at our plans again. I think, you know, you start the year with strategic intents and you know, ambitious plans, but all of that really fell flat on because everything just changed, you know, at the click of a button. So what has happened is that our marketing plans have had to really be very fluid. We have had to really follow through.
Okay, I'm not sure. I think we must have. I think Bridget is frozen there. Okay, so I will just go on right now and get Yomi's thoughts, giving Bridget some time to get back on board, and then we can engage her as well. Yomi, you have some thoughts for us, your initial thoughts.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and good morning or evening, depending on where people are logging on all over the world.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the opportunity. I don't take it for granted. I mean, since most of us on this call, on this webinar, are sustainability or CSR professionals, it will seem unnecessary to be preaching to the choir on the need for us to talk about the importance of those subjects. So I wouldn't want to do that. I'll just want to take a very practical approach and based on my experience at times like this. And for those of us that practice in Nigeria, some of the things that we have seen, and this is about the impact of COVID on CSR and sustainability at marketing. I mean, one of the things I want to put to the fore is that for many people, COVID-19 is an health issue. And therefore, there's a lot of trust in directing efforts around health support. And one of the things that becomes very obvious is that a good portion of budget for CSR or sustainability, and I wouldn't want to go into all those differentiation between both, because most organization has just one pot of money for everything. I mean, they don't separate it. It is we protect professionals that try to say, oh, this is sustainability, this is CSR. For most companies, take $1 million and that's for everything. So the pot of money that was supposed to go into sports and education and gender empowerment and all of that, there's quite a lot of channeling of it towards health, which is a clear indication of the perception of COVID as a social issue. However, based on the experience in Nigeria, we have channeled these funds not to primary health, but to response to COVID. And that's the more dangerous part of it, because our health issues are bigger than COVID. I mean, perhaps they're even more complicated, or perhaps to say our current health scenario has complicated the situations around COVID. If you check the data on mortality for COVID, you see some trends that seem to show some patterns. So we have not had so much of focus on basic health in Nigeria. It has been more like responding to COVID, which looks like I try to tell some of my colleagues that sometimes this CSR sustainability business is like playing football. You can win a match by playing 90 minutes, but you can also win by penalties taken. That this attempts to just flow money into building isolation setup, flow money into doing all those things, is like taking penalties. You will win the game, but the question is that you did not go through a process. And when you finish the penalty, you realize the impact of what you have done, that the situation has not changed before then. What has also become very obvious too is the increased presence and influence of regulators in the way CSR money is funneled. So there are people that have reached out to government. And like I said, I'm just trying to be very practical. There are people that have reached out to governments in Nigeria to say, we want to do this. And government says, no, that's not what we want you to do. We want you to go and do this. So for those that do this for companies, they have seen quite a lot of the herd effect, wherein a company wants to do something to support COVID as part of the CSR agenda, and you are hearing, oh, all the banks are doing this, so you have to do it because you're a bank, or all the oil companies are doing that. And you see that in the way, for example, the Bankers Committee galvanized banks to do one thing, in the way NNPC galvanized oil companies to do another set of things. So there's increased, the COVID has given more of a authoritarian approach by regulators on how people use their donation and investment for social purposes. And they have created like a head where they just point oil companies in one direction, point banks in one direction, point manufacturing in one direction, which is good because it allows us to aggregate money, but unfortunately takes out the opportunity for innovation. Because if everybody has to do what everybody is doing, then everybody will just be doing cut and paste. I mean, so this company builds it, you go build exactly the same thing. We will likely be losing out in terms of innovation. The last point I want to make, and that's also to say, one thing that is difficult now, initially you could actually talk about the impact of COVID on CSR and marketing as a unit of analysis. But something that emerged while we had this COVID was the whole issue around Black Lives Matters and the whole issue about race, and provided another dimension to CSR and sustainability for multinationals. Because while you were trying to battle with the COVID and the issues that came from it, you suddenly had another social wave that brought out a new dimension to how you spend your marketing money. So, I mean, many companies actually start to create advertising and advertisements to show their commitment to the Black community, which is taking the same money from the same pot to respond to that. So that was a wave we did not anticipate that came up along the line. The last point I want to make is how, and I think Ms. Oyechola has made mention to it, how while you're trying to say you're doing COVID, somebody is saying, no, but you're not doing this. So we had the popular case of a bank that wanted to said or insinuated that there'll be some layoffs as a result of closing of branches, and people went on to say, but you just donated X amounts to this cause. Why do you want to do? So why we argue strongly that CSR is about stakeholder interest, I think one thing that this has also shown is that it's not just about CSR, just stakeholder, it's about balancing of stakeholder interest. So you are a bank or you're a corporate, you have community as a stakeholder, you have regulator as a stakeholder, you have your staff as a stakeholder, you have your customers as your stakeholder. One thing this has shown is that many Nigerian companies understand stakeholders, but they don't know how to balance the interest. So you donate money to governments to do COVID, and that's to meet the need of government as a stakeholder. But you come to meet your own employees who are also stakeholders, and you say you're going to lay them off. It's actually implementing a system of contradiction, because that's the money you could have used to pay salary. You have said, okay, I'm giving government, then you guys can go. So I think one thing that became very clear to me in Nigeria is that we seems not to get that balancing of the interests of stakeholders at a time like this. And crisis time is when you see the impact of lack of balance. I'm just going to stop on that note.
Okay, thank you very much, Yomi. A lot of ideas that you brought up. I'm not sure Bridget is back on. Bridget will definitely have some time during my questions to have to also finish up what she was trying to say. Are you back on? Finish up, please.
Okay, I'm back on. Thank you very much. So I was talking about, the heightened activity within marketing. I think that what also we were really relied on at this time, marketing and communications, we were really relied on, just to keep everyone abreast. So a lot of work was really cut out for us in MNC more than ever. We were working around the clock, helping to just balance up people's reputational. We've also had to turn around content quickly. From a marketing perspective, we had to really be creative and turn on content, quickly. So a lot of things that we had planned, like I was saying earlier on, had to change. So the use of technology, for example, having conferences online with clients, having your client meetings, having webinars was just heightened. And I'm glad that, for the organization I work for, Stanbic IBTC, we had webinars and podcasts planned for 2020. And just to see that was activated fully across every other business, across the world, was quite interesting. So for us, I think the greatest hit for us was marketing budgets, with our CFOs telling us that, okay, things are not normal. Organization has to remain profitable. So we've had slash and slash and slash on our budget. So that's the way that we had to now make use of what was left, what we have left creatively. So that's what I just wanted to add on from a marketing perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bridget. You have touched on something very important, mission management, that organizations have actually the fact that, of course, did that, of course, mean sometimes mission identity or just trying to please the regulators. So just finding the balance of where you belong will take me very quickly into my own set of questions for our panelists, and then I'll open the floor to...
Okay, so I suppose, Elizabeth, no opening remarks from me.
Oh, pardon me. Pardon me. I actually thought I did give you that opportunity. So very good one. Thank you, Lante. I'm very happy to have your thoughts, your opening remarks.
I just kidding, because it's very easy, being the last speaker, to just say everything I wanted to say has been said already by all the panelists. So that's probably an easy way out. But I'll just say very briefly, that I'll look at it, that before we can in fact talk about the impact of COVID on marketing, clearly we need to try and understand what has happened to consumers and the consumer behavior. And that's just the area I would just like to flag off very, very, very briefly, in that there are three critical areas that I observe have impacted consumers and consumer behavior. And that's one, health and wellness. Secondly, there's a social impact. And thirdly, there's the economic impact. Now, looking at how that has impacted consumer behavior would obviously have a consequence in terms of CSR and marketing. So from our consumer behavior, consumers, the ante has stepped up in terms of their concerns about health and wellness, which includes hygiene, Marketers are going to have to be looking at that in terms of how do they address the concerns of consumers about health and wellness. And that will include, in fact, even issues around logistics, supply chain mechanisms to assure. So there's going to be issue of trust assurance on the part of consumers. So marketers, companies are going to have to lift that up. So whether you're a consumer goods manufacturer or a service provider, you're going to have to reassure consumers that you're taking care of their safety and health concerns at every point of the supply chain. So that's one from a health and wellness perspective. Then of course there's a social impact and linked also to the economic impact. A lot of people, consumers, are going to reprioritize what they're spending money on. They're focusing more around issues around food, health, and wellness. And therefore, things around what might be termed in the past luxury might become a bit of a challenge. So marketers are going to have to look at how do they offer better value for money for their target markets. That is going to be really important going forward. And then I also see, and I think some of the other panelists have alluded to this, is that we're going to see an increased convergence between corporate social responsibility and marketing, what I may want to term as brand social responsibility. So we're going to have to look at individual brands, looking at cause marketing, looking at being socially responsible, because individual brands now become a subset of the corporate social responsibility. So I think we should expect increasing convergence between CSR and marketing. So it's not just going to be about making money for the sake of money, but how do you do well by doing good? So let me just pause here for now as opening remarks from me. Thank you.
Great one, and very interesting that you touched on the issue of innovation again. And one very interesting thing you did mention, the back-end logistics. And that's very important, because in value creation, if you get the value creation and you miss out on the logistics, perhaps the consumer will be disconnected as well. So that this of course brings up the issue of also opportunities that all of these issues of the pandemic, opportunities that also are available to explore, particularly in our own client. So again, I remember that Bridget mentioned the issue of reputation management. Yobi was talking about the fact that sometimes you're torn between your identity as a company, your mission, and trying to make the regulators happy so that you can continue business. And this will lead me to my next set of questions. And then of course, maybe also getting some more ideas from some of the ideas you have shared. So I would like Oyetola to share a little bit with us, because the issue you mentioned during your speech about purpose and having a system view to addressing the issues. And then Yomi and Bridget have come up with trying to find the balance before where you belong. So I want to ask you this: if and how organization must pursue more authentic CSR beyond compliance, how would they go about it? Is there a mission shift for most people through and post-COVID? And then would this mean that we have to consider institutional and governance frameworks and their implications as well? Please, if you can share some more light on this, Oyetola.
Okay, thank you for this question, or should I say questions? Lots to unpack in that. So first of all, I do not identify with the view of corporate responsibility and sustainability as a mere compliance. Certainly not in this part of the world. As I alluded to earlier, the practice of CSR refers to the self-regulated, hence largely voluntary contribution of corporates to sustainable development. The avoidance and addressing, the negative impacts of their activities and optimal engagement of key stakeholders with a view to meeting their legitimate needs and expectations. So to the extent that these may be codified in an internal policy document or ethics standard guide, there's that element of compliance, but not in the sense that is typically referred to in other regions. So in order to embed corporate responsibility into the heart of an organization, I believe that CSR practitioners should strive for an authentic approach. And what do I mean by that? It means that the corporate responsibility drive should be strategic, that's tied to its core competence as much as possible. The organization should focus on creating and delivering real value. It should build on a genuine interest in stakeholder issues, not simply the company image. and they should embrace honesty and act with integrity always. I mentioned that, and I'm reiterating that it's very important to act with integrity. Through this all, I cannot overemphasize the importance of keeping one's finger on the pulse of stakeholders. I mentioned this before, and I'm reiterating it again. It's one thing to practice authentic CSR by one's reckoning, but the consumers and other stakeholder groups may not see it as such. And as we know, perception is reality. So these are general guidelines that hold true at all times for the practice of authentic corporate responsibility. And more so now as we go through and hopefully emerge on the other side of this pandemic. There's some data that support the importance of embracing corporate responsibility at this time. There's a McKinsey study that shows that consumers are returning to big brands that they trust. Trust is a key asset for companies to have, and authentic corporate responsibility helps to build trust. There's also an OECD report that has indicated that the COVID-19 crisis and resulting market volatility has increased investor interest in ESG issues, which are seen as markers for long-term performance. So that means that how companies are tracking along the lines of ESG indices indicates how well they will do in the long term. So it's very important as well to embrace that. Now, purpose-led businesses is an emerging concept that derives its meaning from, focusing on issues beyond just profits to sustainably impacting on society. And I believe that in rebuilding and moving forward post this pandemic, corporate organizations are being called on to look to CSR and authentic business purpose in fronting the drive to build sustainable businesses that will fare better in the face of future challenges. Institutions, be they regulative or normative, define corporate action in this context. They discourage and constrain, or they encourage given behavioral patterns. And I believe that in tackling this pandemic and all the associated negative implications that it has, the right integration of institutionalism with corporate governance, blended with what I like to call innovation, which is innovativeness combined with purpose-led vision, would drive firms to be more ethical and socially responsible. I hope that is what we find. Thank you.
Okay. Would there be some indicator that you would be hoping to see organizations, wait, like just to finish up on this one, would there be some indicators? What would you like to see? Is there any change you would think is necessary in institutional frameworks and governance frameworks? Are we okay, or do we need to reconsider even such frameworks that we have?
Oh, I definitely think that businesses, so if you look at the history of CSR and how it sort of morphed, it started with philanthropy and then it's just sort of grown organically. I think that there has to be a systemic shift towards purposeful business. I think it's very important. Like Mr. Omayele said, it's very important to look at the impact of what it is that organizations are doing on their brand, and embracing purpose, making it inside out, outside in, top down, bottom up, ensuring that what it is that corporates are doing are driven by the intrinsic purpose that fuels their strategy. I think will be a critical factor for success in the long term for businesses. And I'd like to see more companies embrace business purpose as the fuel that drives what it is that they do, along the lines of corporate responsibility, of HR, of marketing, holistically.
Okay, that's food for thought for leadership, corporate purpose, mission-driven businesses. And because, of course, you did mention again what Lampe had mentioned about, he coined it like as a brand social responsibility. Did I get that right?
Yes,
so I would like to get your further thoughts on, you did mention changing consumer behavior and markets, but I wanted you to speak more about that. What ethical decision making and processes are unfolding that more specifically, just give us some insights. What have you observed thus far?
Okay. I think let me just piggyback on what Etola just said about trust. And I think I also mentioned it earlier on. Trust is going to be a very big issue, and it has to do with how consumers are getting the services or the goods that they have from start to the point of purchase. So that becomes really big. Now, what we're going to see is that consumers are going to be more concerned about that. And therefore, those changes in consumer behavior have to be mirrored by companies as well, because the consumer is going to be a lot more concerned about that. So if, for example, you happen to be a supermarket, consumers are going to be concerned about what are the safety measures you put in place. I'll give you a real life example. So a niece of mine went out for the first time after a long time to a certain supermarket, and she got there and she got very alarmed about the fact that social distancing measures were not in place by the supermarket. And she came back saying, look, she's not going to go there anymore. So those are changes that have to be put in place, especially as we go through this period. And it's not just going to be for this short period. It's going to be much longer lasting in the months, years ahead. So that's a key part that marketers, organizations are going to have to be looking at. Then also in terms of innovation that we talked around already in terms of products and services, but let me speak about the issues around localization. And now this is speaking really more from a Nigerian context. Now with global supply chains having been under threat, one of the key areas that locally have to come into play will be around innovation from a local perspective. What I mean by that is, how are you going to be looking at developing product services that truly address local concerns, but then have a global view in mind in terms of the quality, the standards that we execute with. So that's going to be a key area that manufacturers from a local perspective are going to be looking at, because you're not going to always have easy access to foreign products as before going forward. So that's a key area to look at. And then the third part I'd like to talk about is also in terms of communication. Now, I think that there's going to be a less hard sell. I think because consumers have concerns, you cannot, as brands, be too hard selling, communicating about the products or services that you have. I think increasingly there will have to be some measure of communication that takes care of those concerns. So you're going to have to look at empathy. You're going to have to increase significantly from a communication perspective. So empathy is a key word I think organizations will have to live up to. And that ties again to what I'd already spoken about Etola in terms of a business purpose. We're also in an era of brand purpose. And in fact, it's been discovered. And I think one of the companies that have led this is Unilever a few years ago, where we can talk about brand purpose. And also statistics also show that brands that have an overriding purpose in terms of what they want to deliver to communities, to stakeholders, not just the consumers, but also stakeholders, actually do well on the long run. So this season, the COVID season, now brings into play the imperative of individual brands beyond business purpose, individual brands also having brand purposes that then drives the elements of the marketing mix, the products, the pricing, and everything else that they do from the elements of the marketing mix, and with empathy firmly in foreview.
Thank you, Lanke. Interesting thoughts that you shared. No longer just in time. Some of the things we learned in school are being challenged, the assumptions, no longer now just in time. COVID-19 is telling us agile supply chains as well. So a lot of innovations. You emphasize again the importance of trust. Imagine one consumer saying, I won't go back there, not just because of COVID, but it seemed like the supermarket must have my interest at heart for me to feel that we have a relationship. And so thank you for bringing this and give a very concrete example to buttress the importance of thinking of these things in a deep way and really to see if we're really being led by purpose. I'm wondering if Bridget is back on. I was going to direct my questions, this particular question, but otherwise I'll be very glad to engage you or me at this point. And for me, what is interesting and why I'm so glad to have you all talk to us today is the fact that this is not just some theoretical conversations. This has got to do with lives and livelihoods. In fact, the two, if you look at the social sector, that commands a lot of employment. Many lives in some way, directly or indirectly, depends on the social sector. And if you do look at marketing industry, particularly in Nigeria, we're very happy people and we generally like to connect with brands. And that's another industry that in many ways would mean that our people are engaged, they have jobs, and they have a reason to wake up every day. And it's on that note as well that I'm talking to Yomi. Yomi, we cannot talk about sustainability without talking about progressive, human resources practices and being able to cope during this period and beyond. Things are changing. So what do you see changing? What are these progressive human resources practices that we need to pay attention to? As well as, are there competencies that we should, businesses, organizations, individuals should begin to invest in if they must not only survive, but also, my question. Hello, Yemi.
Yes, hello?
Did you hear my question?
No, I didn't hear the whole part of it.
Okay, so I'll repeat that question again. Okay, so I was asking you if you think that there are some human resources practices that, if you've observed any changes in human resources practices that are important for this time, but also beyond. And then if you also do think that there are some competencies, because you cannot talk about sustainability without talking about the humans that connect all of us, particularly charity starts from home, the employees that we must engage in order to create value for the customer in the marketplace. So what competencies do you think businesses, organizations, and the individuals themselves, what competencies do you think that we must begin to invest in?
Okay, thanks for that question. I just want to highlight three things in talking about the CSR, sustainability, and HR and COVID at a time like this. The first thing I want to mention is that labor and employee rights is one of the pillars of sustainability. And so one of the things I've observed is that quite a number of employers have actually violated employee rights at a time like this. There are companies that, for example, that have laid off people without notice. Some have asked people not just to show up, no notice. They didn't follow the processes for laying off people at a time like this. Some had actually argued that because there's a pandemic, they have a right to just ask people not to show up. Some have just slashed salaries, some have not paid. It's a violation of our labor laws, it's a violation of our processes. Some have actually also tried to import concept that is alien to us, Nigerian labor laws, by saying they're asking employees to go on furlong. I mean, in Nigerian law, there's nothing called furlong. It's an illegal thing to do in Nigeria. So I've seen many companies do that. If I had a conversation with a CEO of one big company that said he has put everybody on furlong, and I said, so what does that mean? He said, well, we'll not be paying them, but their employee. He was explaining. I said, so where did you hear that from? He said, because I saw a company in the US do that. I said, oh, okay, so you just cut and paste, and you think you want to do the right thing, and you say you're doing CSR, and you're just cutting and paste without thinking about the local content. So I've seen that violation of employee rights, and I think it's something we shouldn't do. I've also seen attempts to balance costs at a time like this. Most organizations are not making enough money as they should, and therefore they're taking steps to manage their costs. And so some have decided to either lay off staff, or some have decided, for example, to reduce salary or to find a way around it. I think we should also remember it's about balancing interests. It is ridiculous for you to donate 1 billion for COVID and lay off somebody the next day. It is just plain ridiculous. I mean, so the question to ask is, why don't you balance it? Reduce the amount that 1 billion and pay that person some good severance package if he has to go. It's just about balancing. We have also seen some CEOs come out clearly. I mean, there was a CEO that came out there and said, we're not going to lay anybody off. We'll do everything possible to keep everybody. So some people have been very positive. Some have also been very one Nigerian CEO came on here and said that everybody is going to get a salary reduction, including myself. And I was like, the gold standard at a time like this is that many CEOs are saying they will not take salaries. So when you say you are reducing your salary as a CEO, maybe I don't know how many millions you earn, and somebody is earning 150,000, you can't be talking about reduction of salary between somebody who earns million and somebody that earns 70,000 naira. So one of the things we have seen is CEO have taken more sacrificial stance in terms of either reducing their salary significantly or not taking the salary. We've seen that also happen, and which is something that's, I mean, you know, one of the earlier speakers has talked about trust and investing in people's emotional bank accounts. You can't say things are tough and your own salary is going and you're saying you are laying off people. You must, as leaders, as business leaders, think about what you can use to invest in people's emotional bank account by making some sacrificial gestures. The other part, and that's the last part I'll talk about, is I've seen many companies send out emails and communications that due to the COVID, we're suspending all training. And they say they're not going to train people. And your question is about competencies. Now, you know, that's a very ridiculous part of it. Now, every company says this is a new terrain we are going into. Every company says that it's a new world. Everybody says things are different from what we used to do. Now, that's now the time you don't want to train people. You carry somebody from in science, what we call standard temperature and pressure, you put him in an abnormal situation and you say you won't train him. I mean, you have just set up yourself for that person to fail because the person will not even know how to do it. So you've seen videos of people, for example, who do webinars and don't even know how to conduct themselves in a webinar. They do. So we are moving people into a world that we are not equipping them. Now, I understand if we say we are stopping spend on training, that is different from stopping training. They're two different things. Because training does not always have to cost money. You can ask all your employees, please go and watch this program on YouTube. It's a training on how to conduct yourself during a Zoom seminar. They use their data, they watch it. It's a training. You have not spent zero company on it. So we need to think about those things that we are asking people to stop doing that we ultimately not work well for us. Please, the last point, and this is the last point of this, the employer's duty of care is a legal obligation in Nigeria. This is not just only about CSR or about being obligation or being voluntary. It's a legal obligation. So there are companies, and that includes schools. So Lagos State government has set a date, for example, to say when schools resume. As an employer, you have a duty of care for the health of your employees. Therefore, are you doing enough to make sure the workplace is secure for people as they come back to work? Very, very important. If somebody ever gets COVID and tests positive while working for you, you are liable because you have a duty of care. The other side of it is that if you ever ask employees to work from home and an employee gets injured in his home working for you, you are also liable. So don't think that because we have asked people to work from home, all our concerns for employee safety has been transferred to the home. No. If employee is sitting on a chair and doing your work and gets electrocuted while doing your work, or the chair slips, you are liable as an employer. We need to cover all of that as we talk about how we respond to human resources issues at a time like this.
Thank you very much, Yomi. You have emphasized again the need to engage stakeholders even when we decide to address a problem, an issue. Otherwise, we might be creating further problems. You have mentioned the issue of context. It's important to be guided by the law, the context, what works. You emphasize again the importance of leadership as service, as trust, and of course the need to build from top down creativity skills by everybody. So there must be some creative solutions without lose by all parties. At this point, I would like to encourage just right at the top, and then they can ask the panelists the question, and I'll be sure to pass it on to the panelists during the Q&A. Okay, so I think I have Bridget. I'm just confirming that I have Bridget on now.
Yes, yes I do. Yes, I do.
So, Bridget, great. I would like your thoughts on it. Do you think there's a change in the society and its structure occasioned by the pandemic? And what do you think the role, you talked a bit about this earlier, the role of technology. You did mention how your your foresight, so to speak, in the area of technology did help your organization. But I wanted you to share a bit more on the role of technology in marketing through and post-COVID.
Okay, thank you once again. Well, I think, like I said earlier, technology, the use of technology has really been heightened in the marketing space. We realized that a lot of the traditional ways of marketing that we had been used to, we couldn't really activate at this time. So we really had to be creative in using technology. So take, for instance, I spoke about having client meetings. For example, we have like client breakfast meeting every quarter. And what we had to do was switch to Microsoft Teams to have those meetings. And it was amazing the amount of clients that we could get in the room, as in the Microsoft Teams room, in one sitting. Ordinarily, we'll probably have maybe maximum 60 clients in the room, but we hosted using technology and engaging the clients just to keep them abreast with, you know, the macroeconomics for the second half of the year. And we had over 800 people in the room. So where we had thought that technology wasn't really going to aid marketing, we could see that in these times, technology has proven that, you know, with proper connectivities and use, we could actually reach a lot more people, you know, and we could actually report well back to the organization, because it's glaring that technology creates the platform for everyone to hop on, of course, some, of course, based by invitation and things like that. Another area that marketing technology has really aided marketing is really connecting with the consumers. We could see that across our various platforms, we could connect with the consumers from the comfort of wherever they are seated or they're based. Technology has also helped us with seamless transactions and transactions with the customers. I will keep talking about financial services because that's where I am. Without the appropriate platforms, you were not able to really transact your business. Remember, we couldn't go out for some time. We were all locked in. But from the comfort of your home, using your app and your technology, you could make your transaction, you could pay those bills, you could pay your, you know, your DSTV, you could, you know, pay everything that you need to do. You could purchase things online as well. So technology has really come to the fore in these times, and it has really aided the marketer, to be honest. So what I kept saying, you know, even to my team, is we have to just keep thinking of what more we can do using technology to connect with the consumers and also to make things work seamlessly.
Bridget, just one thing before I let you off on this one. The everyday man, the ordinary man in the streets of Lagos, you know, far in maybe my grandmother's village. What's your take on that going forward, and what must businesses do using technology as an enabler?
So with the everyday man, we thank God for, you know, trying to connect with the everyday man, also using agency banking type things. Communication, I think technology from as a communication tool has really worked. You know, we couldn't really physically connect with anyone, but you could socially connect using technology. So your phone calls, your WhatsApp, your WhatsApp videos, your FaceTime, all of those things. For the ordinary man, that is how they could still stay connected. Even in terms of banking, again, back to where the field I am, using USSDs and things like that, they could still transact and do what they needed to do. So the ordinary man is really catching fast. They might not have the fancy gadgets that we have, but the basic gadget that they have is enabling them connect and communicate in these times. And it will only get on the increase. And I think the awareness, I mean, the situation, the COVID pandemic has really revealed to us that you have to just keep looking for ways to engage, ways to communicate, and ways to do everything that you need to do. The technology factor came to the fore even at this time. And the ordinary man, like you asked, could connect, could communicate, and could transact. So I think even for the future, it can only get better. We see those percentages and the numbers rising for the, even in the rural areas. So that's my take with that.
Thank you. Thanks for that thought. And I think now I'm a bit confident that I haven't left anyone out except Noni. So Noni, everyone in the room, one way or the other, has mentioned the need to engage stakeholders, internally, external stakeholders, you know, and the need to get to speak. Even Yomi was talking about consult the experts, even when you're going to implement your policies, because sometimes you don't know and you need to be guided, you know, again, stakeholder engagement. So Noni, I would like you to please, you know, discuss, you know, how do you think we can forge effective collaborations through those periods? And then of course, we want to thrive post-COVID as well, so that organizations, businesses can be sustainable.
Thank you. I think I could listen to every one of you all day. It's just been fascinating, just learning and hearing different thoughts. I have three takeaways actually, and there are three things I want to highlight: partnerships, societal view, and what I call a mission-oriented approach to CSR. SDG 17, as we all know, is all about partnerships. And I think going forward, I think really CSR is not just what I can do on my own. It's really finding allies and finding ways to collaborate and partner with different sectors, different stakeholders. COVID obviously has highlighted issues around inequality. There is even digital inequality. There's so many things that COVID has, you know, it's just like having a torchlight and saying, what are the problems? You know, but at the same time, COVID has highlighted the fact that you can't go in on your own. It's not just you doing what I want to do to make myself look good. It's about taking a societal view on issues and knowing how to go, and really societal views, and also about supporting government, okay? Organizations wanting to do good must also see how can we tap into government's agenda to support them, okay? It's all well and good, it's fantastic. A lot of organizations have stepped up, they've done stuff, you know, donated centers, etc. But what happens beyond COVID? Okay, what happens to those existing structures that have not been enabled? What happens to the fact that capacity has not been built for the workers that are already there? So what happens beyond, are we going to fold up the tents? What's going to happen with those, some of those equipment? Fantastic, well-meaning. So it just tells us that going forward, we need to have a different way of doing CSR. And one suggestion I would put on the table is something called a mission-oriented approach. And that's really, and if you all remember back when, or not necessarily remember, but you know, the America sending a man to the moon, that was their mission. But everybody's doing different bits to chip in. It's all hands on deck to actually put a man in the moon. So now we say, so if you look at the COVID situation or any health crisis or any sector of the economy, what we should be doing is saying, what is the agenda of government? What government would steer would drive the agenda. They're not going to mandate people to do the CSR. I'm not in any way advocating that. What I'm saying is that we should plug into that and say, what can I do to make us achieve this mission? If the mission is to, we have issues with maternal health, you know, Nigeria's statistics is really distressing, for instance, moving away from COVID, because there has to be life beyond COVID. So, and then we want to make sure that we reduce the mortality rate of mothers or newborns or under 5, and government and Ministry of Health say, for instance, this is their mission. So companies or organizations, and it's really partnership between private, public, citizens, you know, and third sector, everyone come in and saying, this is my area of expertise, this is what I can do, and this is what my organization can do. And then we're all working purposefully towards the same mission, just like Oyetola talked about earlier about purpose, you know. So it can't, I think the CSR needs to be more collaborative. It shouldn't be just about looking good. It shouldn't be just about ticking the box and showing that I've done CSR. It should be about having a societal view. How do we make Nigeria a more, you know, COVID has shown that supply chain has been disrupted. Even in the UK, when it came to doing face masks, you know, suppliers from China, people couldn't access, the NHS couldn't access a mask. But, you know, they've tapped into what a distributed design practice, where they downloaded the information on how to do it. And they started manufacturing, a company in East London started manufacturing face masks, okay? And then what did that enable? It enabled the local economy, the carbon footprint. So COVID is highlighting the fact that we all need to be resourceful, okay? And I mentioned earlier also the fact that people who, for instance, and it's a real problem, because I had conversations with people who feel they were stuck. They couldn't travel out for medical treatment other than COVID. You know, people who have underlying medical treatment. Sadly, there have been a number of people who died from non-COVID illnesses, okay, because they couldn't access their doctors abroad. So, but if we had spent resources in helping build our own assets, perhaps we wouldn't be caught, we won't feel stuck. So in essence, there has to be strong partnerships. There has to be a societal view, way of doing things. And we have to work closer with government. Just one last thing, and it's something that's quite impressed me recently, is the recent, I believe, there's recent, the Nigerian Solidarity Support Fund. Very impressed by it, because it's actually been spearheaded by Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority. Why am I impressed by it? Because it aligns with this mission-oriented approach. You're bringing different stakeholders to the party, and everyone is going to do their own bit. But who is driving it is government. If we don't strengthen capabilities of our public sector, even as businesses, okay, then those businesses will not be able to survive. So I think it's more collaborative approach, more societal rather than a me approach, and more alliance building towards building a sustainable society for everyone.
Thank you very, very much. Very great points you have highlighted: private-public partnership, no silos thinking, societal approach, mission-driven, purpose-driven approach to solving, and then of course taking the learning from those periods in addressing more courses, because there are so many courses yet unattended. And you're saying, if anything at all, COVID is going to strengthen us to remain thinking innovation, creativity at solving societal problems. Thanks for sharing with us. Thank you, panelists, for your very engaging thoughts. I think a few questions have come in. We're still going to try and keep to our timing. So I would encourage the panelists to please just give it brief answers. And then if we need to, after the session, we can always engage you for further explanation. So I'll go through the questions quickly, and I'll try to direct it to each of the panelists. I think this question comes as, can one of the problems in the lack of balancing of stakeholders' interest be the lack of stakeholder analysis and mapping? And I don't know if we would want to speak to that one, where the stakeholder mapping and analysis come in engaging, because Yomi did talk about creating the balance. Nani, are you trying to make an attempt at that?
Yeah, I can answer that. I mean, it's critical. You must know who your stakeholders are. You must be able to map them and prioritize. Okay, so it's again going back to the point Yomi made, which is incredibly valuable and valid rather as well. You can't do one thing and not the other. You have to prioritize, and then your internal stakeholders are pretty critical as well. Okay, so making sure that your internal stakeholders, it's this time and going forward that their well-being is taken care of is important, but you must do a stakeholder mapping. It is important, and then you then prioritize. You can't treat all stakeholders the same. There's no doubt about that. And that's going back to that societal view. If you take that societal view, you will be able to come to the party with what it is that you're able to do. Okay, and you're not going to do this to just dance for the gallery and have everybody applaud you for what you've done, but you've really taken a true assessment of what your resources are, and also what are the societal needs, and how do they align with you? Because be charitable outside and your children have not eaten, it's not going to be possible. It will make sense. Okay, so you will know how, okay, what we need to do differently from a family point of view, and then how much more you can help other people. So it is important to do that stakeholder mapping. It is important to then prioritize the resources you have to know how you can intervene in the wider society.
Materiality, that's important. Get to understand the stakeholders, get some level of idea about the materiality, so that at the end of the day, you do a good job in attending to the issues. Yomi, I think you have a double-loaded one, and I'll just go quite interesting ones also. Yomi, if you could help us with this question. So companies that, compulsorily slash salaries directly or indirectly, I'm kind of reading what the person has written, and then lay off their employees. What can the employees do? And then somebody did ask another one. So if you do say that whilst the employee is at home doing your work and it sustains some injury, you're liable, how do you know that the person is doing the job? I'm not saying the words exactly as the person put it, but Yomi, can you help with those questions?
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the questions. The first one is about what can the employees do. The employee doesn't have many choices. Unfortunately, like we say in Yoruba land, the yam and the knife is in the hands of the employer. The only recourse the employee may have is to sue or go to court or go to Nigeria Industrial Court. That's the only recourse. If the employee is laid off illegally or not in the right way. My request is for us to, as employers, for us to do the right things, because at the end of the day, it comes back to what the employer does, the employer doing the right thing. But if it happens to the employee, perhaps the only recourse he has is to go to court and things like that. Employers should be more engaging. Sometimes it's just good for us to think about when we are in a scenario like this, as employers, we should call town hall meetings and get feedback from employees. I actually know a company that had a plan to lay off employees, but they got superior wisdom and they decided to do a town hall with their employees and explain the scenario. We can't afford to pay all of you. And the employees came and said, you know what, we understand that there is a challenge. We know we're not making as much money as we make. We have all decided to take half salary for the next 2 months, but you keep all of us. And the company actually realized that it was able to do that for the 2 months. It was the employees that initiated the reduction. That's something that we want to do. That's where I would like to talk about that first question. The second one is about an employee who gets injured while doing your work. Are we sure he was doing your work? I don't know, but sometimes at the end of the day, the onus is on you to prove he wasn't doing your work. Remember, you sent him an email or you sent a notice to all employees and say, maybe you wrote something like, you are expected to start to work from home. Remember, our working hours is from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And the guy got injured within that period. How are you going to say he wasn't doing your work? You told him that that's his working hours at home. So maybe sometimes some of those letters and those emails we send, asking to work at home, we need to ask for HR people and our legal people to review it, to ensure that you don't put yourself in a bind. Or some organization, and I say it very specifically, some organization actually specify how the employee should look when he's working. So I know, for example, some employers, and I've seen those kind of communication that says, when you're working, we expect you to, when you're doing this kind of job, we expect you to put on your camera, you're supposed to wear your headset, and you're supposed to be seated right in front. They specify that. If you go to that level of details, anything that happens in that space that you have defined, you can't say you are not liable for it. So I think the issue is, I think what we should first do is provide education to your employees. Just do a webinar and tell them, guys, I know you're working on it. These are the things you need to consider as safety, electricity, chair, ergonomic, what to make sure you train them. That's the first thing. Let them know what to look out for. Number two, you can do like a sample checklist of what they should have around them when they are working to ensure their safety. Send it to them and let them acknowledge the safety. You're already trying to show you are doing things to keep them safe even while they're at home. And do regular checkup. One of the things I think we all need to do as business guys this time is that your employees are human beings. Stop sending only work communication. How are you doing? I hope you're doing well. I hope. Show more empathy. If somebody gets injured at work while doing your work at home and he feels that you have not shown empathy, that's when the person can go legal. But if you have created enough emotional bank accounts positive for this guy, it may just tell you that's all.
Empathy, definitely. And again, you're saying integrity, trust, things that technology can only hopefully enable. So we're back to that. So I know we just got pretty much 5 minutes. There are 2 more questions, and we'll see. Perhaps maybe we can use our other platform. Somebody did want to know about ESG and if CSR is an afterthought of ESG. Noni, there's that other question for you, if you could give some insight about collaborations as regards schools and education. But because of the time factor, and we really do want to say bye-bye when we want to say bye-byes, we'll find another means. Sustainable Conversations is a platform for this kind of engagement. We'll find a way in which we can engage and perhaps have these questions answered and posted to our stakeholders. Because I'm sure it's important to them, and that's why they've asked those questions. Just so that we keep a promise, so we can have another date. I think if IA is on board now, we could have a vote of thanks and say bye-byes. Thank you, everyone, for joining this. IA, are you on board? Okay. Okay, so let me quickly do this then. So we have to, in just a couple of minutes or thereabouts, we'll have to go. And so thank you, all of you. It's been an awesome time. I have learned a lot. It's been really nice having this expert panel discuss very important and key issues with us. So I want to start by saying thank you to our panelists. Oyetola, Yomi, Lampe, Bridget, Noni, you have been awesome, really awesome. And thank you for sharing your time and insight with us today. I tend to do an Oliver Twist kind of thing. So you might see me soon somewhere coming to ask for further engagement, like I said, so that our stakeholders indeed can go in a way more enriched, getting more things in that regard. To our participants, it's an engagement because you decided to join us. Thank you for being here. I think we've had over 50 attendees, and we are very grateful for your time as well. We wouldn't have been able to put this up without our wonderful media partners. A million thanks to Business Day, and to ProShare. Thank you for your commitment to creating a change for our country, but also definitely from our country as well. And then to my colleagues, together we made this happen. Thank you, I really appreciate you. And it's just awesome that we could work together so that our country can become a better place for everybody. Thank you everyone for being here. And from my end, please keep safe, and it's bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for coming on board.
Thank you. Nice
Thank
to see
you so
you.
much.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you
Bye.
very much. Bye.
Bye.